Shawty's like a melody in my head that I can't keep out. Got me singing like na 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 every day's like my iPod stuck on replay.
Biodiversity is the variety of life, such as plants, animals, fungi, microbes, and other living things, within a particular region. Biodiversity can refer to genetic variation within individual species, ecological diversity amongst ecosystems and habitats, or species diversity in abundance and richness of different species. Biodiversity can be seen at any scale, from 5 inches to 5 feet to 5 miles. Biodiversity is everywhere and extremely important. One of the many benefits of biodiversity is keeping ecosystems sustainable. Past studies show that more diverse ecosystems are better at resisting droughts, repelling invasive species, and have higher primary productivity. Having more diversity acts as a security blanket by ensuring that if one species is lost, there is another species, or groups of species, which can step in and take over its role within the ecosystem. Similar patterns can be seen with nutrient cycling. Generally, there is a positive correlation between nutrient cycling and diversity. Numerous organisms are involved in transforming nutrients, as can be seen here with nitrogen cycling. One group of bacteria is involved in denitrification, while a completely separate group fixes the nitrogen, and the decomposers play an important intermediate role. Biodiversity provides extensive values to human beings. Important biological resources include food, pharmaceuticals, medicinal spices and herbs, building materials, research, and cultural practices are all impacted by biodiversity. Nearly 100% of our pharmaceuticals come from biological resources. 70% of drugs come from plants, 18% of them come from fungi, 5% come from bacteria, and 3% come from. For example, the drug Taxol, which is a leading anti-cancer drug, was derived from the Pacific yew tree. Other prominent drugs used for Hodgkin's lymphoma and childhood leukemia are derived from the rose periwinkle. Without biodiversity, the pharmaceuticals we utilize today would be non-existent. With over 7 billion people occupying our planet, the diversity in our biota plays an integral part in our agricultural industry. Food production is reliant on animal and insect biodiversity. 87% of the world's population relies on pollinators. Humans need animal, bacterial, and insect biodiversity to protect our supply and be mechanisms of control in agriculture. Each organism is extremely important. For example, if the bee population went extinct, 1/3 of crop production would be lost. That means you'd have to say goodbye to the orange, the apple, the coffee, and chocolate industries. External biodiversity is not the only important aspect in crop production, but the genetic biodiversity of our various crops also remains vital. Because only 12 crop species provide 70% of our food supply, genetic biodiversity is absolutely crucial. The diversity in genetics reduces the chances of crop failure, increases the resistance to plant disease, and it can lead to an increased yield in crop production. Each aspect complements the other. Because of the biodiversity of our planet, we can thrive as a human population. Unfortunately, with our ever-changing world, there are several threats to biodiversity. One of the major threats to biodiversity is habitat loss. Habitat loss is the loss of habitat due to the clearing of native vegetation for agricultural, housing, and industrial purposes. It can also include the flooding of valleys to form reservoirs, or even the draining of wetlands. Genetic biodiversity is reduced when habitats are lost. Another threat is habitat fragmentation, which is the alteration of a habitat that results in the spatial separation of the original habitat. It can be caused by the similar developmental activities that cause habitat loss. When a habitat is fragmented, there is a loss of genetic and species biodiversity. A third threat to biodiversity is invasive species. Invasive species can alter the balance in an ecosystem and push native species to collapse, resulting in a reduction of species biodiversity within a. Examples of some invasive species seen today include Phragmites, kudzu vines, and zebra mussels. The fourth threat to biodiversity is pollution. Chemicals made in industry, construction, power generation, agriculture, and others can poison all life forms in the soil, water, and air. These chemicals can affect biodiversity by creating imbalances in the system. ultimately killing individuals, species, or entire habitats. Climate change has several implications and is a major threat to biodiversity. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere change the range of temperature in an ecosystem. These changes affect biodiversity because it forces species to relocate to more adequate environments or ultimately die. Niches are opened, species interactions are disconnected, and species are reduced, all leading to a reduction in biodiversity. A final threat to biodiversity is overexploitation. We use natural resources for food, construction, industrial products, pet trade, fashion, and traditional medicine. Overharvesting leads to a loss of key species. It allows foreign species to invade and may result in a complete loss of an ecosystem. Fortunately, not all hope is lost. We can stop the loss of biodiversity in several ways. The first is by changing outdated natural resource policies to increase the protection and support of biodiversity. Another vital step that we can take is by educating the public on the importance of biodiversity in order to sustain life as we know it.
A place where there's plants and bugs. It's gross because there's bugs. Gross.